Glorious devotees, thank you for viewing another presentation on Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī's Sandarbhas. We're now on our second in-depth and comprehensive review of the Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha. In the first class, we began with the first Anucheda, and we saw that Jīva Gosvāmī's approach at the beginning of the Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha is to give a very thorough commentary on the third chapter of the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, wherein Srila Sutta Goswami presents, in response to the questions of the sages, and specifically Sunaka there, representing them, he was requested, Sutta, to speak of the various avataric descents of the Supreme Lord. So this third chapter, of course, includes the core essence of the key to understanding the entirety of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the Parivās Sutra, and Jīva Gosvāmī is going to gradually bring us up to that particular verse from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by going step by step through the verses of the third chapter as presented in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. One thing I wanted to mention in this regard is the significance of what is our process for gaining a sound footing in spiritual life, and specifically in Krishna consciousness. As Jīva Gosvāmī has explained at the very beginning, these Sandarbhas are for those who are aspiring to become devotees of this manifestation of the Supreme. Of course, the Supreme Lord has unlimited manifestations. So he's presented in the first three Sandarbhas leading up to this Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha preliminary information to bring us to this point of fully exploring the nature of Krishna. And he wants to impress upon us the significance of Svayaṁ Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa and the significance, although he's already mentioned it in the Tattva Sandarbha, the significance of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam as our primary praman, giving evidence to this viewpoint of spirituality. And it's a radical viewpoint based on this Purana, as opposed to the Prasthanatrayi that was accepted by other Vaishnava Sampradayas up to the point in time of the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So they accepted Bhagavad Gita, the principal Upanishads, and Vedanta Sutra as the primary source of transcendental knowledge. And with the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we give much more importance under his guidance to the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam as the primary praman for understanding the Supreme. So, as I said, Jīva Gosvāmī wants to impress upon us this Krishna conception. And if we look at truly an approach to spiritual life which can be beneficial to us, this idea of being impressed upon with spirituality is very significant, because we can see that being impressed is what drives us and has driven us since time immemorial within the material realm. At least coming into the human form of life, we look at different courses that human society collectively and individual humans take, and we can see that the courses, the directions they take in their life is based upon what's impressed them in life. A simple example, I may be impressed by a specific presentation of music. Maybe it's rock and roll, maybe it's classical music. Within either one of those genres, I may be impressed with a particular instrument that's used to make that music. And therefore, I study specific musicians who utilize that instrument. And I'm impressed by the way they use that instrument to express music, and I become very much attached to that impression. I maybe even become super attached to an individual in a band. And immediately, wherever that person is playing, whether it be Isaac Perlman or one of the Beatles, I have to be there. I have to see that performance. I'm so overtaken with the impressions I've received from them that they become a role model for me, or they become an object of worship. A role model in the case that I want to pursue being like that individual, or I may just be impressed and infatuated by them and the way they make me feel when they play their instrument, or the way they make me feel when they do their business in the world. So we can see that our material life is based upon impression upon impression. And sometimes those impressions are so significant that they completely overtake our being, our existence, our sense of self. So we start to identify, I'm a rock and roll star, or I'm a classical violinist. And we start to study. We compound those impressions by going to an institution where I can be further impressed with that course of pursuit. Sometimes those impressions carry from one life to another. And when they carry forward, in Sanskrit, we have a terminology, samskara. It's like, it's a real deep impression. It's really stuck with us, so much so that I may have studied music and practiced music, and all of a sudden I'm born in an environment to let me continue with that because my desire was so intense that coming out of the womb, I immediately have innate talents coming forward. So material life impresses us, and we allow ourselves to be impressed. We utilize our intelligence to be impressed in so many different fields of activities. And what really impresses us to the point of making an imprint on our very being, which can be referred to as a samskara, that's who we relate with. That's who we become. We become that classic musician. We become that rock star. We become that businessman. We become. So many we becomes, and then we become tired of that one, and we move on to another impression. And then we move up and down the ladder, and then we want to be impressed by controlling, and we move up to the heavenly sphere, and we may even take a position of management within the material manifestation. And then we may fall down from that. We may offend someone and be cursed. So impression is really central to our sense of self. So much so that even the bodies that we take and continually in samsara from one body to another, those impressions can become such that even the body that we inhabit takes on certain characteristics based on the depth and significance of those impressions. What is Krishna consciousness? It is placing ourselves where we can be impressed. We can reprogram our impressions from a material aspiration to a spiritual aspiration. I mention this to highlight the significance of coming into this study and this in-depth unpacking of the nature of the Supreme Lord as Jiva Goswami is giving us in his Sandarbhas. He is unpacking the essence of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam using its key, magical key, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam. He's unpacking the Sandarbhas, utilizing that key so that we can become impressed with this manifestation of divinity, Svayaṁ Bhagavān, Śrī Kṛṣṇa. And this is what constitutes a groundwork for our spiritual involvement and a groundwork which will, when properly pursued, result in a complete absorption in spirituality based upon this conception. Now, we're going to find here that as we go through just this beginning in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, wherein the various manifestations of the Lord are put forth by Sutta Goswami, all these different avataric descents coming up to the significance of Krishna, we can see that the beginning of the Sandarbhas give us this conception of, as we approach spirituality, we can develop a conception, and that conception can be broadly seen as going towards Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. When we take to a spiritual pursuit wherein we accept that the Supreme Lord has his own spiritual nature, his Swarup, then he can manifest that in unlimited ways. But we are pursuing a specific manifestation of divinity, which, from the viewpoint of our sampradaya, substantiated by scriptural revelation as explained by the sadhus and the saints from our sampradaya, completely reveals divinity in what we accept as its topmost manifestation. Then those same acharyas go on to unpack for us the topmost loving exchanges that we can have with that topmost manifestation of divinity. So we should be impressed by this, and we should allow these impressions to come to us. We should immerse ourselves in such impressions, and we should be open to the constant revelation which is the characteristic of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. We should not become simply stuck in one place, but we should allow ourselves to remain open to all that the Sampradaya has to offer and all that our spiritual master and the present sadhus and the Purva Acharyas of our Sampradaya have to give us, and constantly allow ourselves to become students forever in this ongoing pursuit of a loving relationship with this specific manifestation of divinity, Svayaṁ Bhagavān, Śrī Kṛṣṇa. And as we go on in Kṛṣṇa Sandarbha, Krishna is going to be revealed more and more by Jīva Gosvāmī. His transcendental abodes will be revealed to us, and his eternal associates will be revealed. And we should allow those impressions to come upon us in a profound and significant way. So we'll start here with the first verse from the 3rd chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which will complete the commentary on the first Anucheta by Jīva Gosvāmī. Sutta Goswami begins his 3rd chapter by saying, "In the beginning, prior to the cosmic manifestation, the Supreme Personal Absolute Bhagavan, intending to evolve the cosmos, manifested the form of the Purusha, who was enfolded within, Sambhutam, him, along with the tattvas beginning with Mahat, and endowed with the 16 evolutionary principles necessary for creation." The meaning of this verse is that Bhagavan manifested the form of Mahavishnu, who is endowed with all the material ingredients required for creation. Implicit within this form are the totality of jivas along with their individual karmas, carried over from the previous creation cycle. The 16 evolutionary principles refers to the 5 Mahabhutas, space, air, fire, water, and earth, the 5 cognitive senses, the 5 conative senses, these are the knowledge acquiring and the working senses, and the mind presiding over those senses. So these are the 16 principles that Sutta Goswami is speaking about in this first verse. We continue to the second Anucheta, and specific details about the nature of these Purusha avatars And Jiva's taking some time here because this is what we are most acquainted with. So if we can understand how the Supreme manifests the world and how he administers the cosmic manifestation, both its first creation, referred to as Sarga, and Visarga, these are 2 of the 10 subjects of a major Purana. So Jiva's taking some time here to let us know exactly how does this material manifestation come forth from the Supreme Lord. He's going into this in depth because this is what we're acquainted with. So we should know the environment that we are in and how the Lord manifested it. So he continues now with the 2nd and 3rd verse from this 3rd chapter, Sutta's continuing. To verify that this form of the Purusha, Mahavishnu, is also the source of the secondary creation, Visarga, Sutta Goswami speaks the following 1.5 verses. And then he quotes from the Bhagavatam, while he, the Purusha's second manifestation, was displaying his yogic sleep of supraconscious absorption, Yoga Nidra, reposing on the Garbhodak ocean, Brahma, the master of the progenitors of the world, appeared from a lotus growing from the lake of his navel. It is on the configuration of his, the Purusha's limbs, that the world is conceived to extend. So Sutta here is giving insight in the 2nd and 3rd verse into the next manifestation of Paramatma. First we have the Mahavishnu, lying on the Karna ocean, also referred to therefore as Karnadakshai Vishnu. Then so many universes are springing forth from his pores, or in so many ways it's referred to, but basically they're coming forth, and that same Purusha is entering into each of those individual universes. And when he enters within those universes, from him springs forth, sometimes it's referred to perspiration. It would be transcendental perspiration, I guess. And he fills up the bottom half, and he lies down on what's referred to as the Garbhodak ocean. So first we have the Karnadakshai lying on the Karna ocean, and then we have the Garbhodakshai Vishnu lying on the Garbhodak ocean within each individual universe. Jiva Goswami continues to unpack this verse for us. The pronoun Yashya of him refers to the first Purusha's second manifestation, Dvitiya Vyuha, who, having entered the universal egg, and there's unlimited universal eggs, was reposing on the water of the Garbhodak ocean. This is how the sentence is to be syntactically arranged. It is on the configuration of the limbs, or in other words, the overt arrangement of feet and so on, of that Purusha lying there in that manner, that the world is conceived to extend in the shape of the universal form, Virad Akara. So Jiva is saying, Sutta's given this because it's going to be explained in detail. I heard it from Sukadev's discourse, and he does go into some detail on this meditative conception of the material manifestation, that different aspects of the material world can be seen as a meditative. We can meditate on a form of the Lord as the creator, the Purusha, and see the universe in that Purusha and all that we are acquainted with through our phenomenal sense perceptions of the world around us. We can conceive of all that being the Lord himself. This is advantageous for the beginning yogi, and that will be explained as we go forward and look at what comes from the commentary. The configuration of his limbs is as described in the Bhagavat. Patala constitutes the soles of his feet. Jiva is quoting from the 2nd canto. Such descriptions are put forth for the benefit of beginners on the path of worship to steady the mind. In other words, it is not that this is a factual form of the Purusha. So Jiva's giving us how to look at these sections of the Bhagavatam that elaborate upon this Virat conception, the Rod Akara, form of the Lord. Jiva continues, alternatively, it is to be understood that he created the world expanse by his limbs, which are its cause, as expressed in the Shruti, beginning with, the moon was born from the mind of the Purusha, up to the earth appeared from his 2 feet, and the directions from his ears. And in like manner, the various planets also came into being. So this conception of the Purusha is there. These trends of thought run throughout the Vedic literature. So here Jiva is saying, see, we can see that even in the Shruti, the Rig Veda, this idea comes forth of the Purusha. So it's important that we understand what is this conception, and we put it in proper perspective. And that's what Jiva's doing for us. His literature is directed towards Gaudiyas. There are so many transcendentalists who are aspiring to various spiritual goals, but as he stated at the very beginning in his Mangala Charana, this specific presentation of the Sandarbhas, or for those who are seeking to further deepen their understanding and love for the Krishna conception. But when we come to these, we're going to see these statements in various scriptures. How are we to see them? And then in the middle of his second Anucheta, he quotes 2 significant sections from the Mahabharata that also speak to ways of looking upon this manifestation of the world and these Purusha avatars, the Paramatma feature of the Supreme. So, after quoting verses from the Mahabharata, Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī states, so his Sandarbha continues, so I took out those long sections so we could get to what he concludes from those sections. In this way, after describing Sankarshan's majesty, Sri Vyasadeva spoke also of Aniruddha's majesty in the verses beginning with Anirodho Hi, also from the Mahabharata. In the later verse, the word Lokeshu, literally in the worlds, means in each Brahmanda or universe. The appellation Mahan Atma, the Supreme Self, means Paramatma. He is the Paramatma, Mahan Atma, in each universe, Lokeshu. Vyaktatvam, in the verse from the Mahabharata, means having become manifest. Prakatyam, from Pradyumna, is to be added in the later sentence to complete the sense. This will go on to explain how the Paramatma manifestations are seen in relationship to the terminology of the Chaturvyuha, which is the 4-fold manifestations of divinity. So we will get to a little bit more on this. Sutta, however, intending to speak of the essential non-difference of Pradyumna and Aniruddha, did not mention Pradyumna separately, as is also the case in the verse, Vishnu has 3 forms. This manner of description is evident in the 6th chapter of the 2nd canto, as in Sridhar Swami's commentary on verse 2639. The clause, Sa esa adya purusha, he is the original Purusha, means he is the original Bhagavan, who, appearing as the Purusha, enacts the functions of creation and so forth. Now we may question, why is Jīva Gosvāmī going into such detail? It's for our benefit, so that we can understand when we see in Scripture references to Pradyumna and Aniruddha and Vasudeva as these manifestations of Karna, Garbho, and Kshirodakshai Vishnu, we can see how these terminologies have been utilized. He concludes this second Anucheta saying the following. Similarly, in Sridhar Swami's commentary, the Purusha is the first avatar of Para. The word Purusha means of the supreme Bhumna. Purusha means the impeller of Prakriti, whose form is the matter of cosmic play. Lila Vigraha is described in Vedic mantras such as Sahasra Sirsa Purusha. He is the first avataric descent, Ajovatara. Similarly, in this regard, one should examine the section of verses from 12 to 17 of the 20th chapter of the 3rd canto, along with Sridhar Swami's commentary. Therefore, this form is not interpreted as that of the Virat. It is thus also to be concluded that Bhagavan as Vasudeva is certainly distinct from the Purusha. Jiva is sorting this all out for us to understand these statements, understand them, utilizing the knowledge that I'm providing here, that first of all and foremost, when we come across these various descriptions speaking to the nature of the Virat Purusha or the Virat manifestation, that these are a meditative tool. And also understand, in addition to that, putting that in its place in our consciousness when we come across such statements, understanding they're to assist us in seeing that everything's springing forth from the Lord. And his energies pervade all of material existence. We could see the whole material manifestation as his very body. That's a way to begin to relate to what we're acquainted with and put it in the context of a connection with divinity. It's a good place to begin, but also understand that in the ultimate conception and our understanding, these manifestations of divinity coming from Narayan in Vaikuntha, springing forth from him and lying on the causal ocean, that manifestation, which enfolds within it all of the potentiality for material creation, those 16 evolutes, and holding within it the aggregate of the Jiva Shakti, the potentiality of separated consciousness exploring its potentiality in relationship to those material manifestations. All those are coming from an individual manifestation of the Supreme in 3 different aspects. And we will dive more deeply into those aspects as we go forward, specifically in the commentary to this Anucheta. So, keeping all these in place, it may seem a little to us, what's the need? I'll just go to Bhagavad Gita and say, I accept what Krishna says, and from a single spark of my splendor, this entire universe unfolds, and I'm content with that. Well, that's okay for those that are content with that. We understand there are transcendentalists who are content with simply this understanding. But when our acharyas, when somebody of the spiritual significance of Jiva Gosvāmī takes the notebooks of another of the Goswāmīs and puts them in a form where we can study them, there has to be some utility for us in undergoing that study. These Goswāmīs, they are the foundational architects. And they give us the perspective upon this primary praman, which was so much adored by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that just to simply say that this detailed knowledge is truly not that important may not be in our best interest. We should not perhaps take such a superficial view. We worship Krishna's words from Bhagavad Gita, but we are following a path of Raganuga Bhakti. We refer to ourselves as Rupanuga, following the course of Rupa Goswāmī, as leading the Goswāmīs in our pursuit of spirituality. So this detailed knowledge, as much as we can comprehend it, is advantageous to understand the Virat Purusha in proper perspective, to understand these three manifestations of Krishna's Paramatma feature and how they have manifested and created the material manifestation in order to facilitate their devotees' further progress in spiritual life, and how we somehow have been pulled into such a spiritual current flowing towards Golok. It's quite amazing that we have this opportunity. So some highlights from the commentary here on this second Anucheta. In this Anucheta, Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmī continues to explain the process of evolution as described by Sutta Goswami. His intention is twofold: to delineate the three manifestations of the Purusha, or Paramatma, as distinct from Bhagavan, and to show that the Virat Purusha is not a real form of the Purusha, but an imaginary portrayal of the universal structure as a form of God to provide an object of meditation for neophyte spiritualists. Continuing in the commentary, cosmic evolution is described in different places in the Bhagavat Purana, as well as in other scriptures. Sometimes these descriptions seem to contradict each other. The reason for this is that they may not all provide the same measure or precision of detail. There are 4 expansions, Chaturvyuha, of Bhagavan in the spiritual world, called Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Vasudeva is the original form, and the other 3 proceed from him in that order. In Krishna Lila, Krishna is Vasudeva, his brother Balaram is Sankarshan, his son is Pradyumna, and his grandson Aniruddha. In Ram Lila, the 4 Vyuhas are the 4 brothers, Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrughna, respectively. It is not necessary that with every avatar all the Vyuhas are manifest, because we only have 3 manifestations of Paramatma, so there's not 4. So it's not necessary. It's explained here. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states the following in his commentary on Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. This is what Vishwanath himself writes in his commentary on the same verses from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. The first form, Mahavishnu, is the inner soul of Prakriti. The second form, Garbhodakṣai, is the inner soul of the collective jivas in each universe. The third form, Kshirodakṣai, is the inner soul of each jiva. The 3 acting as inner souls are expansion of Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So the primary creation, Sarga, is affected by Mahavishnu, who is the Paramatma for the metacosm, or the aggregate material nature, Prakriti, then expands himself as Garbhodakṣai Vishnu, the Paramatma for the macrocosm, or the individual Brahmanda, meaning here an individual universe. The third expansion is Kshirodakṣai Vishnu, the Paramatma for the microcosm, or the individual jiva. Now, if you remember, Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī pointed us in the direction of Sridhar Swami's commentary on verses from the 3rd canto so that we can understand the evolutionary theory behind the material manifestation. We'll find here in this a little bit of an unpacking of and a summarization of what Sridhar Swami said so that we could see the significance that Jiva wanted us to study there. The discussion is summarized as follows. During the period of dissolution, the material universes as a whole are enfolded within the unmanifest state of Prakriti, in which the 3 gunas remain in a neutralized condition. At the onset of a new creative cycle, Mahavishnu, who is the regulator of Prakriti, impels time to unsettle the equilibrium of the gunas in accordance with the aggregate karma of the jivas from the previous cycle. The first evolute, so now material nature has been stimulated by time, and now we're ready to get into a manifestation of the creative cycle so that the, as stated here, aggregate karma of the jivas, those impressions and that unactualized reaction and desire on the part of the jivas can be effectuated within a material manifestation. The first evolute generated from the gunas interaction is mahat. Just for terminology's sake, the state of equilibrium, where the gunas are neutralized, as stated here, is generally referred to as pradhan. And then, once there's a little bit of activity, the terminology changes to mahat, or cosmic intellect. There's something to do. There's a potentiality there to manifest that latent karma that's been lying dormant, itself being neutralized at the end of the prior manifestation of the material energy. Although mahat is predominantly of the nature of sattva, luminosity, it becomes dominated by rajas, dynamism, at the time of creation. Ahankar, the phenomenal I, awareness, with its three divisions of sattva, rajas, and tamas, becomes manifest from mahat. How does it become manifest? From ahankar predominated by sattva, the mind is generated along with the presiding deities, devas, of the senses. From ahankar predominated by rajas comes the 10 senses. That would be both the knowledge acquiring and the working senses. And from ahankar predominated by tamas come the 5 tan mantras, gross elements. Well, first of all, the sense objects are the tan mantras. So we have our 5 senses and we have 5 sense objects that they can perceive. So the subtle essence, as it said here, of the elements, which give further rise to the 5 mahabhutas, the mega elements. So the tan mantras are those subtle, the sense is there of smell, and the tan mantra there is of something to smell. And then we have the manifestation of gross elements, which within the material, once the material manifestation comes about, they give off a scent. Thereafter, by the intention of Mahavishnu, these elements combine together to form a golden egg. This universal egg lies lifeless in the causal ocean for 1,000 years. A moment, less than a moment. After that, Vishnu enters the egg, thus bringing it to life. A lotus then sprouts from the lotus navel of Vishnu. Its brilliance is that of 1,000 suns, as it encompasses the totality of all jivas within its fold. So we can imagine this lotus that Brahma comes on is as brilliant as thousands of suns. It encompasses the totality of the jivas that are going to inhabit that universe. Brahma appears on top of that lotus. Then Garbhodakṣayi Vishnu enters the heart of Brahma and inspires him to evolve the universe according to the system laid down in the previous cycle. So the previous creation cycle is repeated by the Brahma, who is the secondary creator. So the primary creation, coming from Garbhodakṣayi Vishnu, is referred to as Sarga, and the secondary creation is Visarga. And that is enacted by Brahma and all of the jivas coming forth through Brahma and through Garbhodakṣayi Vishnu to effectuate the material creation. Thank you so much for your kind association. Panchakalpatubhischa, Kripasindhabhyevacha, Patitanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavijay Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Dhīra dhīra jana priyau priyakarau nirmasaram pujitau